The chronicle of the dinosaur Coelophysis begins in a desperate age. 200 million years ago, life was an experiment forged in unforgiving volatility. Our subject, a featherweight predator, barely 30 kilograms, was the first successful theropod. Its revolutionary design, the hollow form, gave it supreme speed and agility, defining its primary weapon as its very frame. Its secondary weapons were scalpel-like jaws and keen stereoscopic vision, perfected for gripping small, fast prey. Yet, its life was relentless warfare. It was prey to the giants, stalked by apex predators like Dinosaur, Postosuchus, and the massive phytosaurs. Its survival tactic was simple: run, hide, do not be seen. The chronicle begins in desolation, focusing immediately on the consequence of an unforgiving world. The Triassic dawn, 200 million years ago. This era was not the lush jungle of later ages. This was a primordial, harsh experiment. Life itself was clawing its way back from oblivion. Against this backdrop emerges the subject, the dinosaur Coelophysis boweri. Its very design was an answer to this desperation. This creature was the first iteration of a winning formula, embodying the designation hollow form. Its radical anatomy, defined by hollow, air-filled bird-like bones, established its weight class, featherweight. Barely 30 kilograms and 3 meters in length, this was not a heavyweight. It was a precision instrument. The core of its existence was speed and agility. This lightness was its revolutionary advantage. Its skeleton was a marvel of bioengineering. The presence of the furcula, or wishbone, a structure once thought unique to birds, was an adaptation for agility, reducing weight to maximize speed. Its long, slender legs and three-toed feet were designed for a rapid, efficient stride. This fighter was built to move like lightning. We see it in a hyper-realistic bullet-time freeze, perfectly balanced, frozen mid-stride, showcasing its perfect, lightweight form. The necessity for agility informed its primary tactic, the hunter, but a new class of hunter, the ghost. It could not win a direct fight against the titans, so it evolved to never be caught in one. The brutal calculus of the Triassic meant every potential calorie was exploited. It finds a carcass, a juvenile of its own species. There is no hesitation, only desperate hunger. This act of desperate necessity defined the species. This is the brutal, necessary world of Coelophysis. The cost of survival demanded an unspeakable price. Inside the fossilized gut cavities of several large adult specimens were the tiny bones of juvenile Coelophysis. This horrific evidence created the epithet, the cannibal, a monster that ate its own young. But even this grim theory is now debated. Newer analysis suggests the juvenile bones may have actually belonged to small crocodilomorphs, which were structurally similar. The science may have changed, but the desperate philosophical question remains. In a world of drought and starvation, would a desperate parent truly refuse an easy meal? The external threats against the dinosaur Coelophysis were overwhelming. The entire existence of this lightweight predator was shaped by the need to avoid collision with the true rulers of the land. The primary threat, The giants. Towering over them all were the Rauisuchians, the true apex predators. A creature like Dinosaur Postosuchus was the absolute epitome of Triassic terror. It was the size of a truck, a bipedal nightmare of muscle and teeth. Against this overwhelming power, the small, lightly built dinosaur Coelophysis was not a contender. It was, unequivocally, prey. The survival of the dinosaur Coelophysis was a constant strategic dance. Its entire hunter strategy was based solely on avoiding this apex. We witnessed the standoff. The ground shakes violently as the immense, thundering foot of Dinosaur Postosuchus slams into the dusty ground. The small dinosaur Coelophysis is frozen in terror between two boulders, its terrified heartbeat pounding against the dust. Against this threat, the small dinosaur had only one effective tactic: run, hide, do not be seen. Its hollow, light frame afforded it an incredible advantage: agility. It could scramble nimbly up steep, rocky inclines inside narrow canyons, finding a path that the heavier dinosaur Postosuchus could not follow. Its speed allowed it to exploit the verticality and complexity of the terrain to find safe, hidden ledges, while the giant predator roared in frustration far below. But the Rauisuchians weren't the only external enemy. The water itself was hostile. Phytosaurs, giant crocodile cousins like Dinosaur Smilosuchus, waited patiently, perfectly camouflaged, just beneath the murky river surface. The water was a lethal ambush zone. Dinosaur Coelophysis was forced to approach the stream cautiously, knowing the slightest ripple could unleash a massive lunge and the snapping jaws of a hunter dominating the waterways. This small predator had to be an opportunist, a specialist in the shadows. It needed its speed to ambush swift prey, like Triassic amphibians and lizards, quickly snatching them from the shallows. Its predatory gaze, its stereoscopic vision, granted it the keen depth perception necessary to track targets and operate effectively in the dim light of dawn or dusk. This relentless need for caution defined its entire existence. Its entire hunter strategy was based on avoiding this apex. In the face of overwhelming external threats, the dinosaur Coelophysis also faced its most pervasive rival, itself. Dinosaur Coelophysis was one of the most numerous predators in its environment. This was not a species. This was an infestation. This overwhelming density meant that every other dinosaur Coelophysis was a direct competitor for food, water, and territory. The resulting Ghost Ranch scenario was a ruthless tactical chess match where the greatest foe was the one who shared your weapons. The fight for survival wasn't just against other species, it was a civil war. We witnessed the desperate physical reality of this competition. Frenzied scrums erupt over meager scraps of food. Two rivals face each other in an aggressive display, tense, chirping and hissing, ready to fight over territory. Their agility and light frames meant their battles were bursts of brutal, high-speed action. In the fossil record, we find the grim evidence: tangled, interlocked skeletons, frozen as if they died fighting each other. This was a constant, desperate scramble against its own kind. The question of the cannibal's shadow is tied directly to this rivalry. Inside the gut cavities of large adults, were found tiny bones. This ghastly evidence, debated between juvenile Coelophysis bones and small crocodilomorphs, highlights the environmental pressure. In a world of drought and starvation, when resources vanish, desperate hunters, even kin, would turn on each other. This desperation manifested in chaotic struggles for the last meal. The ultimate struggle for any dynasty is the fate of the future, the battle for the next generation. Dinosaur Coelophysis laid clutches of eggs in sheltered nests, but the fragility of the hatchlings meant the parents' struggle was compounded. The adults and juveniles, trapped together in the flash flood at Ghost Ranch, show the social bond, but also the collective tragedy. The family unit was trapped in the wrong place. The nest, for this predator, was a battleground of absolute desperation. The Triassic experiment, defined by volatility and sudden failure, would eventually end. A mass extinction event cleared the board. The formidable giants, the Rauisuchians like Dinosaur Postosuchus, vanished. The phytosaurs, gone. But the dinosaurs survived, and the revolutionary hollow form proved to be the winning design. Dinosaur Coelophysis itself disappeared from the geological record, but its legacy was immortal. It was the biological blueprint for all theropods to come. That light, hollow-boned frame, that fast, bipedal stance, that forward-facing, predatory gaze. From this humble, desperate survivor, a dynasty of killers would be born. Millions of years later, this same light, rapid design, scaled up to terrifying proportions, would produce the giants of the Jurassic, Dinosaur Allosaurus, the swift and intelligent hunters of the Cretaceous, Dinosaur Velociraptor, and the tyrant king itself, Dinosaur Tyrannosaurus Rex. Even the birds in our sky today carry a trace of its hollow bones. Dinosaur Coelophysis was not just a species. It was the first draft of an empire. We look at this fighter, this pioneer, and we see the harsh price of innovation. Dinosaur Coelophysis was a creature born of desperation. It was forced to live in the margins of a hostile world, surviving on scraps, enduring drought, flood, and its own kin. Its survival was proof that adaptability, not brute force, is the true engine of evolution. It was the ghost that outlasted the giants. The small pioneer darts playfully and victoriously over the massive, crumbling, half-buried skeletal remains of the gigantic Rauisuchian that once sought to crush it. For you is the legacy of Dinosaur Coelophysis, the weapons it forged, the nest it may have died for, or the desperate struggle it endured at the dawn of an empire? Whose survival chronicle should we reconstruct next? Nominate a new paleontological record in the comments.